remember you, or maybe just a couple of people.
It's been one planned trap.
Tubi has been doing something quietly remarkable with its free catalog, assembling a genuinely eclectic mix of underseen films that spans martial arts cinema, existential philosophy, documentary crime, low-budget sci-fi, and one of the most visually distinctive American films of the past decade. None of these 15 films arrived with a significant marketing push. Most of them found their audiences through word of mouth among the specific communities that sought them out. All of them are worth considerably more visibility than the algorithm has provided. From a 1985 Yankovic mockumentary, to a 1994 Jet Li masterpiece, to a film where C.K. Williams' ghost sits in an empty house for a year. 15 films, all free, all genuinely good. Let's find them. Number 1, Coherence, 2013. 8 friends sit down for a dinner party on the night a comet passes unusually close to Earth. The power goes out. A strange house with lit windows appears in the dark neighborhood, a house that should not be there. What follows is a masterpiece of low-budget science fiction constructed almost entirely from the improvisational performances of its cast and James Ward Byrkitt's screenplay, which was deliberately withheld from the actors to preserve the genuine confusion and anxiety their characters need to experience. The film's central conceit, that the comet has fractured reality into multiple parallel versions of the same evening, is developed with a rigorous internal consistency that the restricted budget enforces rather than undermines. What Coherence achieves is the specific sense of dread that arrives when the familiar becomes irrevocably wrong, when the group of people you have known for years become potential strangers from a slightly different version of themselves, and there is no way to verify which version is the one you came in with. The film operates through performances, dialogue, and a single location with such concentrated intelligence that it makes everything that costs more look wasteful. Available on Tubi, where it has been building a devoted following for over a decade, and will continue to do so. From 8 friends whose reality fractures at dinner, what follows is a different kind of dinner party that fractures differently, an invitation that turns out to be something its guests cannot leave. Number 2, The Invitation, 2015. Will attends a dinner party hosted by his ex-wife Eden and her new husband David at a house he used to share with Eden, a house where a tragedy occurred that defines Will's relationship to every subsequent moment in the film. The other guests are old mutual friends. Eden and David seem changed in specific ways that Will cannot account for, and the dinner progresses with a slowly accumulating wrongness that Will cannot make anyone else perceive. Karen Kusama's film is the finest recent example of a specific horror mode. The slow-burn social horror in which the audience is never entirely certain whether the protagonist's mounting suspicion is perception or paranoia. Logan Marshall Green as Will carries the film's impossible tonal requirement, a man who may be right and whose rightness or wrongness the film withholds for as long as it can sustain the ambiguity. Tammy Blanchard and Mitchell Huisman as Eden and David perform the film's surface warmth and its underlying menace with a calibration that keeps the audience's sympathies perpetually unstable. The Invitation is one of the most disciplined and most underseen horror films of its decade, and the climax's arrival, delayed with extraordinary patience, is one of the great horror payoffs of recent American genre cinema. From a dinner party whose invitation turns out to be a trap, what follows is a love letter to a home that may never have been what the person who loves it believes it was. Number 3, The Last Black Man in San Francisco, 2019. Jimmy Fails has a specific and non-negotiable belief. The Victorian house in San Francisco's Fillmore district was built by his grandfather, it belongs to his family by historical right, and the fact that he cannot afford to live in the city that changed around him without his consent does not change that right. Joe Talbot's film, co-written with Fails from Fails's own life, is a poem organized around a relationship between a person and a place. The way that a house can become the repository of identity and history and belonging in ways that market value cannot measure and cannot revoke. Jimmy Fails and Jonathan Majors as his best friend Mont carry the film with a chemistry that makes their friendship feel genuinely historical. 2 young men who have developed a private language around their love of the city that is moving around them. The film's visual language is among the most distinctive in American cinema of its year, shot with an attention to the specific quality of light and architecture in San Francisco that makes every frame feel like a considered act of preservation. The Last Black Man in San Francisco is a film about what is lost when a place stops being able to hold the people who made it what it was. From a man who cannot afford to live in the city his family built, what follows removes the city entirely, a ghost, an empty house, and a year of sitting still. Number 4. A Ghost Story, 2017. C. A musician dies in a car accident near the house he shares with M. He returns as a ghost, visually represented throughout the film as a figure in a white sheet with 2 eye holes cut into it, like a Halloween costume, and haunts the house in silence as M grieves, moves away. The house changes occupants, the neighborhood changes, decades and then centuries pass. David Lowery's film is the most formally radical on this list, a meditation on time, grief, and the way places hold the consciousness of those who love them, made with an aspect ratio that mimics old photographs and a willingness to hold a single shot for longer than any mainstream film would permit. The ghost vigil is simultaneously sad and cosmic in scale. The film's most famous sequence, in which M eats a pie in the kitchen for an uninterrupted several minutes, while the ghost watches her from behind, is the kind of cinematic gesture that demonstrates total confidence in what the film is doing and asks the audience to match that confidence. Rooney Mara and Casey Affleck barely appear in a conventional sense. The film is mostly about absence and duration. A Ghost Story is not for everyone. It is very much for the right audience. From a ghost who watches and waits as time passes, what follows is about a couple whose relationship time has tested, and what a strange retreat house reveals about the time they have spent together. Number 5. The One I Love, 2014. Sophie and Ethan are a couple whose relationship has developed the specific fractures that accumulate when intimacy meets disappointment over years of shared life. Their therapist sends them to a retreat house for a weekend. At the retreat house, something is wrong in a way that neither of them can immediately articulate. And once they can articulate it, they cannot agree on what to do about it. Charlie McDowell's film is a science fiction romance built on a premise. It reveals slowly and uses thoughtfully. A film that understands that the emotional stakes of its relationship drama are more interesting than the genre mechanics that generate them. Mark Duplass and Elizabeth Moss are perfectly calibrated together, a couple whose dynamic is fully legible in their early scenes, which gives the film's later complications genuine emotional purchase. The One I Love is the kind of small, inventive, formally precise film that the independent American cinema produces periodically and that tends to disappear into streaming catalogs without finding the audience it deserves. It earns every one of its genre ideas through the quality of the relationship at its center. From a couple's strange discovery at a retreat, what follows is about a different kind of discovery, a man who has been wronged so completely that the only available response is the most dangerous one. Number 6. Blue Ruin, 2013. Dwight is a drifter living out of his car on the Virginia coast when he learns that the man who murdered his parents is being released from prison. He drives to the prison, follows the man from the parking lot, and kills him. This is the film's first act. What follows is the specific, increasingly terrible series of consequences that arrive when an ordinary person with no training, no plan, and no exit strategy commits an act of violence and is not prepared for what violence generates in response. Jeremy Saulnier writes and directs a revenge film that is more interested in the realistic mechanics of escalation than in the genre's usual cathartic satisfactions. Macon Blair, as Dwight, carries the film on a performance of sustained, grounded incompetence, not as comedy, but as the genuine condition of someone who has done something irreversible without the resources to manage its consequences. Blue Ruin is the revenge film for people who find the revenge film's standard power fantasies insufficient, a film that refuses to make the genre's violence feel consequence-free or empowering. It is also very tense and very well made. Available on Tubi, where it is one of the strongest films in the catalog. From a revenge spiral without an exit, what follows is about 2 men who have no exit of a completely different kind, minor characters waiting in the wings of someone else's tragedy. Number 7. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead, 1990. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are 2 minor courtiers from Shakespeare's Hamlet who spend most of their existence in antechambers, waiting, tossing coins that always land heads up, discussing mortality and language and the nature of existence, and being occasionally summoned into the main action of a play that is not about them. Tom Stoppard adapts his own 1966 stage play for the cinema with Gary Oldman and Tim Roth as the two men, and Richard Dreyfuss as the player king who understands the machinery of narrative that the two principals are caught inside. The film's sustained argument that existence at the margins of a larger story is the defining condition of most human lives, not the exception, has aged into something that feels more resonant with each decade rather than less. Oldman and Roth find the character's specific combination of intelligence and helplessness with performances of considerable wit and genuine sadness. Stoppard's dialogue has not dated at all. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead is available on Tubi and is one of the most rewatchable films in the catalog. Each viewing reveals new levels of the text's precision. From two men who cannot escape the story they are trapped inside, what follows is about a group of people who may not have escaped the story they think they left behind. Number 8. The Endless, 2017. Two brothers who escaped a UFO death cult as teenagers return to the cult's compound years later, ostensibly to bring closure by confronting their past on their own terms. What they find is that the compound's residents appear to be healthy, happy, and completely uninterested in being rescued, and that the desert surrounding the property has a physical quality that does not behave like normal desert. Justin Benson and Aaron Moorhead write, direct, and star in a film about the specific allure of certainty and community in a world where both are genuinely difficult to find, wrapped in a cosmic horror mythology of considerable formal ambition. The film's Lovecraftian elements, the supernatural presence that operates on the property, the specific rules it seems to follow, the recurring patterns that suggest something cycling through enormous loops of time, are integrated into the film's thematic argument about cults, rather than deployed as spectacle. Benson and Moorhead are two of the most interesting genre directors working in American independent cinema, and The Endless is the fullest early expression of what makes their sensibility distinctive. From a cosmic horror film about the allure of certainty, what follows is a documentary about a man who built an entirely alternative reality and lived inside it, and what it cost his family. Number 9. Being Frank, the Chris Seavey Story, 2019. Chris Seavey was a musician, artist, performer, and devoted family man who invented Frank Sidebottom, a character with a giant papier-mâché head who delivered surreal local comedy in Manchester, and progressively allowed Frank to consume a larger proportion of his life, creative energy, and capacity for ordinary human presence. Steve Sullivan's documentary uses Seavey's own obsessive self-documentation, alongside interviews with his children, collaborators, and bandmates to construct a portrait of a person who was simultaneously a genius, a compulsive, and a man who could not quite distribute enough of himself to the people who needed him most. The film is funny because Frank is funny, and because Seavey had genuine comic gifts that went beyond the character. It is also genuinely painful in ways that the comedy does not soften. Being Frank inspired the 2014 Michael Fassbender film Frank, which is a departure from rather than a portrait of Seavey. The documentary is the more complicated and more honest document, a portrait of creative obsession that does not romanticize what obsession costs. Available on Tubi, where it remains one of the catalog's finest documentary finds. From a man who built an elaborate alter ego and lived partly inside it, what follows is a documentary about a man who built an elaborate media persona and never quite let the real person back out either. Number 10. The Complete Al, 1985. Weird Al Yankovic's mockumentary chronicles his rise from accordion-playing nerd to international superstar through a combination of concert footage, scripted fictions presented as documentary truths, and the specific deadpan commitment to its own absurdist premise that is the defining quality of all Yankovic's best work. Jay Levé directs a film that understood in 1985 what the mockumentary format could do the same year that This Is Spinal Tap was establishing the genre, and deployed it with an affection for its subject that gives the film a warmth the purely satirical mockumentary often lacks. The Complete Al is a document of a specific cultural moment. The early MTV era, the transition from novelty act to genuine phenomenon, and the very specific comedy of a person who has decided to treat parody as a completely serious art form. Yankovic himself is the film's entire argument, a performer whose complete sincerity about what he is doing is what makes it work at the level it does. The film is available on Tubi and is a fascinating companion piece to the 2022 biographical film Weird, the Al Yankovic story, which covers adjacent material with considerably more fictional license. From a mockumentary about a genuine American pop phenomenon, what follows is a documentary about a true crime case that changed American law and cultural understanding of gender identity. Number 11. The Brandon Teena Story, 1998. Brandon Teena was a young man living in rural Nebraska who was murdered in 1993 after his natal sex was revealed against his will. Susan Muska and Greta Ola's documentary was completed before Boys Don't Cry, the narrative film that brought the case to international attention, and it has a rawness and an intimacy that the fiction film, for all its power, could not access. The documentary includes interviews with community members, with people who knew Brandon, and with family members whose grief and whose responses to questions about Brandon's identity make the social context of his death fully visible. The Brandon Teena story is valuable both as a document of a specific historical crime and as a portrait of the specific American rural environment in which that crime occurred. The conditions that made Brandon's death possible are depicted with the patient camera of filmmakers who wanted to understand rather than simply condemn. The film's age has not diminished its relevance. If anything, the decades since its completion have given it additional weight as a record of conditions that have not changed as much as they might have. From a documentary about a real American tragedy, what follows is a documentary about a different kind of descent into the unknown. Finnish cave divers staging a nearly impossible mission. Number 12. Diving into the Unknown, 2016. A group of Finnish cave divers are on an expedition in a Norwegian cave system when two of their team members fail to return from a dive and are presumed dead. The surviving divers face a choice whose options are both unacceptable: leave their friends' bodies in the cave, or attempt a retrieval mission that every expert they consult describes as suicidal. Juan Reyna's documentary follows the survivors as they train for the retrieval, negotiate with the Norwegian authorities who want to prevent the mission, execute it, and attempt to process what it has done to them. The film is about loyalty, about what we owe the dead, and about the specific ethics of a community that has developed its own relationship to extreme risk. A community that understands cave diving not as recklessness, but as a precise technical practice that has its own moral logic. Diving into the Unknown is the most emotionally complex film on this list. It generates genuine tension about a mission whose outcome the audience is aware of, and genuine grief about losses that the film has made fully specific before they occur. From Finnish cave divers navigating a literal unknown, what follows is about navigating a different kind of unknown, the relationship between the living and the dead on a Hawaiian island. Number 13. I Was a Simple Man, 2021. Masao is dying in Hawaii, and the film moves through time with him, through his life, through his marriages, through the island's changes across decades, through the appearance of figures from his past who arrive to sit with him as his death approaches. Christopher Makoto Yogi's film is a Hawaiian elegy shot in the specific light of the islands, using the supernatural elements of its narrative, the dead who return, with a delicacy that makes them feel less like genre conventions and more like a specific cultural relationship to the presence of those who have passed. The film is slow in the way that the best slow films are slow. Every scene earns its duration, every image justifies its screen time, and the accumulated weight of the film's temporal movement gives its emotional moments a density that rushed filmmaking cannot achieve. I Was a Simple Man is a film about the specific quality of a life lived in a place, the way landscape becomes memory and memory becomes landscape, and it is available on Tubi with almost no visibility despite being one of the most formally accomplished American independent films of its year. From a man at the end of his life on a Hawaiian island, what follows is a martial arts film from 1994 that is still the finest showcase for a specific performer's abilities ever produced. Number 14. Fist of Legend, 1994. Chen Zhen returns from Japan to Shanghai in 1937 to discover that his master has been killed in a challenge match that Chen suspects was not conducted fairly. Gordon Chan's film is the finest demonstration of what Jet Li was capable of at the peak of his physical abilities. Shot by director of photography Arthur Wong, with a visual specificity that gives each fight sequence a distinct spatial logic rather than simply showcasing the choreography in isolation. Yuan Wu-ping's choreography is exceptional throughout and deployed with a restraint that the film's dramatic stakes consistently earn rather than simply generate a spectacle. Fist of Legend is also a genuinely intelligent film about the relationship between martial arts traditions, Japanese-Chinese historical tensions, and what is lost and what is preserved in cross-cultural exchange. The final fight between Chen and the Japanese general he respects is one of the most formally accomplished action sequences in the Hong Kong martial arts tradition, a confrontation that is simultaneously a physical display and a philosophical argument. Available on Tubi in a solid print, and essential viewing for anyone interested in action cinema's highest formal achievements. From a 1994 Jet Li martial arts masterpiece, what follows is an Iraqi war film from 2019, intense, gritty, and built on the same commitment to practical specificity. Number 15, Mosul, 2019. A young police officer in Mosul is rescued from an ISIS ambush by the Nineveh SWAT unit, a team of Iraqi special forces whose composition, methods, and mission exist outside the conventional military structure because the conventional military structure is not equipped for what they are doing. Matthew Michael Carnahan's film, produced by Joe and Anthony Russo, is conducted entirely in Arabic, shot with a visual language that prioritizes the specific geography of Mosul and the specific operational reality of urban warfare rather than the legible choreography of Hollywood action, and performed by an ensemble that brings the weight of what the Nineveh SWAT unit actually represented to communities in Mosul. Adam Bessa and Suhail Dabach anchor a film that gives its characters enough specificity that the violence carries genuine cost rather than abstract dramatic weight. Mosul is one of the most underappreciated war films of the past decade, a film that treats its Iraqi subjects with the seriousness and specificity that most American productions set in the region conspicuously fail to provide. Available on Tubi and genuinely deserving of a larger audience than streaming visibility alone has provided it. 15 films on Tubi that span a 1985 Al Yankovic mockumentary, a 1994 Jet Li martial arts masterpiece, 2 existential comedies, a Hawaiian elegy, a Finnish cave diving documentary, a 1998 true crime documentary that changed cultural conversations, and some of the finest American independent cinema of the past decade. All of them free. All of them worth the time. Tubi's catalog rewards the viewer willing to dig past the surface recommendations, and this list is 15 reasons why. More buried films, more free catalogs, more lists. Come back.